Hi, it's Brian. This is the awards contender, and in today's video, I am very excited to bring you my review of Anatomy of a Fall, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes last May. This was the second film I saw at the Telluride Film Festival, my first night after Rustin. I was so tired. I was like, I don't know if I have a 2.5-hour mystery courtroom drama in me. But the only other time I had to see it was going to be in the middle of a very long movie day, and I felt like this movie was going to deserve my full attention. I didn't want to be like coming off of 2 other movies and then rushing to another night screening. I was like, no. Let's give this film my attention the first night, and let me really try to soak in this disturbing, compelling story. Anatomy of a Fall is easily one of the 5 best films I saw at the Telluride Film Festival. It wasn't a movie I was necessarily loving every minute of its running time. I had kind of a strange reaction to this film in that at like the 45-50 minute mark, I was kind of mixed on it, honestly. It's very, very good for a while, the sense of place, the performances, but once we get into the courtroom, we're there for a long time, and there was a point where I was like, okay, I can't even breathe anymore. I need to get out of this courtroom. There was this one segment of the movie I was like, man, I don't even know if I like this. This is too much. And then something really weird happened. Right when I was like, okay, I need to get out of this courtroom, we actually do cut to a scene, a flashback scene outside of the courtroom, an argument between our main character and her husband that goes on for like 10 plus minutes. That is one of the most extraordinary scenes in any film I've seen in 2023. It's so good. And I was like sitting up in my seat. I was back into the movie full bore. And I was like, okay, I know what the director is trying to do with this. I then understood why we were spending so much time in the courtroom without leaving. It was to give this argument scene its full power. And then after that, there's like another hour plus of the movie left to go. I was like all in. And by the time I got to the end of the movie, I was like, wow. Masterpiece. This is something really special. Anatomy of a Fall is a captivating mystery. It opens with a death pretty soon in the film's running time. I want to say it's like 5 to 10 minutes in. Everything seems to be okay in our main character's life. Sandra Hüller also plays a character named Sandra in the film. She is at her home talking to a friend. It's winter time. She has a son who is blind who is taking a walk with their dog, and they come across his father, her husband, dead in the snow. Blood is everywhere coming out of his head, and it looks like he either fell to his death or maybe he got bludgeoned in the back of his skull. It's not very clear. But of course, Sandra becomes the number one suspect. This is a marriage that had had its problems, and because her son is blind, like there's not necessarily a witness to what happened, how this man fell to his death or was murdered. It's not clear. So Sandra does become a suspect, and she is put on trial for the murder of her husband. As Anatomy of a Fall plays out, there are so many riveting revelations about Sandra and her past, about her relationship with her husband, about her relationship with her son. And really, the less you know about this movie going in, the better. I really didn't know much. Like, I knew of its awards at Cannes, and that it apparently had an amazing lead performance, and that there was a murder and a courtroom trial. Like, that's about all I knew going into this film at Telluride. And I was so happy I hadn't been spoiled on much, because this movie does get, in the second half, very interesting. There are some surprises, some very emotional moments, and you never quite know where it's going to go next. And that's always exciting in a movie. It's so boring, especially when you're watching like a murder mystery, a courtroom thriller, and you've already figured out the ending by like the halfway mark. That is not the case with Anatomy of a Fall. You will not necessarily know what's coming in that third act, because really the filmmakers are much more interested in character over plot. Like if this story had been made by an American filmmaker, let's say back in the 1990s, this movie would look very different. But the focus on character is what makes this film so powerful, so resonant, and the performances in this movie are bonkers amazing. Yes, I had heard great things about that lead performance, but oh my god, Sandra Hüller, who is also in the zone of interest, which I'm going to talk about very shortly. I didn't really know much about her career until after I had watched Anatomy of a Fall, and I'd looked her up, and the only film she's made prior to 2023 that I recognized is Tony Erdmann. Like, she's been working in film since the early 2000s, but this is like her breakout year. This is her moment, and just wow. She is so strong and vulnerable and believable at all times. I mean, you don't really know if you should root for her or not as the movie plays out, because you're like, did she play a role in her husband's death? Like, is this a good person, a bad person? She is so much more complex than that. You really get a sense of her history and what she wants out of her life at this moment. And it's really just a star-making performance for this actor. She is incredible in this movie. The Best Actress Oscar race is stacked. I currently have her in like 6th or 7th place. But the more I think about it, like, is she going to be this year's Isabelle Huppert Elle nomination? You don't see a lot of international people nominated in lead actress at the Oscars year to year. But I think Sandra Hüller is just so amazing in Anatomy of a Fall, it's going to be a difficult performance to ignore. I mean, I think she could potentially win a couple big prizes next season. And like at this moment, I don't know who we push out. I mean, Annette Bening, sad to say, is vulnerable for Nyad. I have her in 5th place right now. And I don't know, man. I just don't know if that film is strong enough to get Bening into that race. I could see Hüller missing at a couple places, but then she gets that Oscar nomination. That could happen, especially if Anatomy of a Fall gets into Best Picture, which I do think it's going to make it there. Like, with 10 slots, I don't know how you deny Anatomy of a Fall. It's too good of a movie. Like, even those who like it less than others, I can't imagine there's going to be too many negative reviews, negative takes on Anatomy of a Fall. It's just going to be one of those highly rated international films that gets into Best Picture. I mean, picture, director, and screenplay feel very likely for this movie. And I would even throw in one more performance in the film I thought was extraordinary. I've talked a little bit on the channel before about how young actors rarely get into the Oscars. Like, it only happens here and there throughout the decades. But if there was going to be one shocker Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination next year, I would give it to Milo Machado Granay, who plays Daniel, the blind son. I won't give it away, but he has one emotional moment at the end of this film that took my breath away. Like, this is one of the best child performances I have seen in a movie in the last 10 years, easily. It is a rich, complicated character that he portrays beautifully all throughout this 2.5-hour film. Like, I think that performance is absolutely worthy of a Best Supporting Actor nomination. I would love to see that happen. And just as I reflect on this movie a few weeks after having seen it, this is one of the ones that stood out over Telluride weekend. Many films that weekend I liked, but there were only 5 that I loved. All of Us Strangers, The Holdovers, Poor Things, Saltburn, and yes, Anatomy of a Fall. This is a must-see masterpiece that I know is going to do well next award season. I mean, it didn't hurt to start off with that Palme d'Or at Cannes, and then getting lots of buzz throughout the summer into the fall. Now it's playing the fall festivals, and more people are discovering it. So although I have to be honest, I did find a couple moments in the movie a little slow, especially in the first half. Once we get to that argument scene in the kitchen, everything after that, I was on board. I was with this movie's rhythms, its pacing, its performances. Like, this film really takes on a life of its own after a while. And again, by the end, I was just knocked out. This is a great film. It is one I have not stopped thinking about since that first night at Telluride. It is chilling, it is memorable. There are some images in this film like I will never forget. Anatomy of a Fall is going to do very well next award season. I think it gets into at least 3 of the top categories at the Oscars. It is a must-see film that is very much worth your time. I give this movie a very enthusiastic 9 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned in the coming days for more reviews from the Telluride Film Festival, including the Zone of Interest and the Bike Riders. We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.